I'm Stephanie Agar, the Membership Events Manager, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to tonight's talk, the latest in our series of fashion and fiction events with Rosie Goldsmith, perfectly timed for International Women's Day yesterday, which I hope you all celebrated. It was almost as if we planned it. I am absolutely thrilled to introduce tonight's speakers. Award-winning author Bernadine Evaristo's work spans novels, poetry, essays, literary criticism, and drama for both theater and radio. And if that wasn't enough, she's also a professor of creative writing at Brunel University and has fortunately found time as well to be here this evening, so we're thrilled about that. I'm sure, as many of you know, her most recent novel, the multi-voiced and highly engaging Girl, Woman, Other, took home the Booker Prize last year and was just last week longlisted as well for the 2020 Women's Prize for Fiction, which, if you have read it, you know is very well deserved. And if you haven't read it, why not? And you should. But you've got plenty of time after this evening. Bernadine is joined this evening by journalist and presenter Rosie Goldsmith, whose fashion and fiction series we have been extremely fortunate to host over the past few years. So I'm so looking forward, like you are, to this one. So I know you're keen to hear from them both. So please join me in welcoming Bernadine and Rosie to the stage.
Well, this is rather nice. What a wonderful turnout. Thank you so much for coming. We've got a lot to tell you tonight, so buckle up and hold on to your seats. We've got a lot to show you as well. We've got some wonderful photographs, things you'll never have seen before. And we've got a wonderful book to talk about, and right at the center of it all is Bernadine Evaristo. Now, when I saw this book, when I read this book and met Bernadine about a year ago, in fact, this is the heavy hardback, heavily annotated as well, and lots of little post-its in there. And I looked at that book, I read that book, and Bernadine, we were at the Hay Festival together, and I said, this book's a winner. And you went, oh. I knew, a lot of us knew, who'd read Bernie's work before too, and she's been writing for 25 years. So 1994 was your first novel, wasn't it? And lots of, 8 novels, this is the 8th. And today we're celebrating the launch of the paperback. So that's another great reason for all of you to be here. At least half the price, I think, so you can buy 2. There you are. Anyway, welcome to you, Bernie. It's really, really wonderful to have you here. And this is a very special series because what we do with this series is look a little bit at a different angle at the novels, the literature, the people we're talking to. And I don't know whether you were here 5 years ago. Exactly this week, Margaret Atwood started the series with me here in this room. And we talked about Margaret's love of sewing. So, Bernie, we're going to start talking about, first of all, you and fashion and colour, and you actually like you like clothes, don't you?
I guess I do, yeah, when I go out.
But you always dress beautifully, colourfully.
I slop about at home.
What do you wear at home?
Sainsbury's tracksuit bottoms, and baggy t-shirts, and trainers or Birkenstocks.
So have you, since winning the Booker Prize, have you actually changed your style at all?
Not really. I think I changed my style a couple of years ago, and I started wearing bright shirts because they make a statement, and I can just pair a bright shirt with a pair of jeans, a pair of old boots, and I feel like I'm ready to go.
What about the headbands? And the headbands?
Yeah, the headbands. Well, I've actually got a receding hairline.
Well, so have I, but I can't wear it. I wouldn't be able to wear that.
So I wear this to push my hairline down a bit, actually.
Right, fact number 1. Secret number 1 is out.
Yes. But then I like it. I like the look. Yeah.
Are you enjoying all of this? I
mean, I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I've actually been writing nearly 40 years. So I started when I was in theatre.
So you published 1994, the first novel.
That was my first book, but I actually began in theatre in 1982. So to win the Booker at this stage in my career has just been incredible. Yeah. And I'm determined to enjoy every single moment until someone else wins it next year, this year.
Well, maybe they won't award it this year because basically you should both have a year each. I think you and Margaret Atwood, because of course they won it together, which is the extraordinary thing. But, well, look, as I say, we have quite a few surprises for you tonight. We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about black fashion and identity and all kinds of other really interesting things. But first of all, you're going to have the most wonderful surprise, because I think this is the right one. Hopefully. Yeah. Now, we're going to look inside the fashion background of Bernadine Evaristo, the romper suit. So I'll show you another one as well, because there's that romper suit, and then there's this one. You were born in Woolwich,
Yes.
and there's, as legend now has it, you're the fourth of 8 children, and your mum is English, and your dad was Nigerian. So tell us about you, a little bit more about you, through all these wonderful pictures. I'll keep clicking so you can see a few more.
Yeah, so I grew up in Woolwich, large family, Catholic family, socialist father, very political family, in fact, and very white area. Anyone who knows Woolwich today will think otherwise, but actually my father was practically the only Nigerian in the village. And yeah, but I had a wonderful mother, wonderful parents. They really looked after us. We were kind of victimized in the street where I grew up, because we had this big old house, and kids used to smash the windows in. So there was always this feeling of, I didn't think it was on. Okay, so yes.
Thank you, Stephanie.
So there was always this feeling of feeling like outsiders. And of course, when my mother had 8 children in 10 years, so at that stage, I don't know how old I am in the little picture of myself. I probably was about 1 year old, I think. And my mother already had 3 other children and a newborn. And maybe that's why she didn't, she let me run around sort of wearing clothes like that. But I feel that is my inner self, actually. That picture of myself as a baby with those scruffy dungarees and
well, actually, funnily enough, because you do continue the dungaree theme throughout your life, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't worn them for a few years, but yeah. I would do.
Trousers and
yeah, I always wear trousers.
Yeah.
And with that picture, I think my natural tendency actually isn't to be sort of smart, it's to be scruffy.
You obviously enjoy
baggy
it, though.
clothes.
You enjoy this, don't you? You enjoy dressing up.
I enjoy it, and then when I get home, I'm going to strip everything off and put my tracksuit bottoms on.
Let's look a few more. And is this sisters?
These are 2 of my sisters.
Right.
Yes.
So the occasional skirt was...
Yes, and I think that at this stage, I don't think I can choose my own clothes. No. I'm still, sort of wearing what my mother buys me, or they're probably hand-me-downs, actually, because we didn't have any money, so yeah.
No, and I came from a big family as well, too, and it was a similar thing, too. My mum was a wonderful dressmaker. So, and then I also took up, sewing as well. Did you sew?
I learnt to sew and knit from my grandmother and my great-aunt. So my grandmother was a dressmaker. She was born at the turn of the century. This is my mother's mother from an Irish family, and she made clothes without a pattern. She would make the most beautiful, exquisite wedding dresses without a pattern. And my great-aunt was a knitter and a crocheter. So they would make blankets and babies' clothes and everything.
They were so skilled then. Right, we're going to whiz through a few.
So I think with this one, this is when I'm starting to decide what to wear. And I remember that skirt, I loved it. And I think we had a little boutique in Woolwich, I can't remember what it was called. And it was a suede patchwork skirt. And I was very, very proud of it. And actually I'm wearing these red sort of baseball shoes. And I wear Converses today. And some of them, I wear red Converse boots, and they look like those shoes and some others that you're going to see. So it's very interesting that my style began actually when I was probably about 11.
It is absolutely fascinating how, if you look back over photographs of yourself, and you did this for us, how we do forge that style pretty early on. And we try to fight against it, maybe, but very much. I mean, there's a photograph of me wearing green, yellow, and brown platform shoes at about 10. And guess what? I'll still wear those. Not where I live in Wiltshire, though, because it's a bit too muddy at the moment. But now this is really interesting, because did you compile this at the time?
As I said to you earlier, I've got thousands of photos of myself. And I used to go into Woolwich, I think it was Woolworths, and go into the photo booth and take pictures of myself. And I kind of assumed everybody did that, but I'm now on Instagram, and I put these pictures up, and people say to me, "My God, you've got so many images of yourself." And then they say, I've hardly got anything. And I realise that it's quite extraordinary to have such a record. But I think what's interesting about these photos is that I'm beginning to develop my own style. And I went to the youth theatre, Greenwich Young People's Theatre, from the age of 12, and I learnt to be self-expressed, to be creative, to work with my imagination. And I think that's starting to be reflected in how I dress. So I stuck out in the area I grew up in because I was a black child, but I then kind of made a virtue of it and decided I didn't want to fit in. So what you see here is a teenager, mostly a young teenager, trying to wear clothes that are going to make a statement that I don't want to be part of who you are, because you don't accept me, so I'm going to do my own thing. And in the theatre world, and the world that I discovered through the youth theatre, that was something that was valued and cherished.
Now, I know you don't mind us telling everybody else, but you are 60 now, and and you've done so much, and you started in theatre, as you've been telling us a little bit, but you went on to form your own theatre company as well. So you've directed, you've acted, you've written plays as well, and that was your whole life before you started writing novels, or were you doing it sort of side by side?
I was writing for theatre because there were no plays featuring black women in Britain in the 80s, and then my theatre was always emerged as poetry, and then I began to just write poetry, and my first book was a poetry book. The picture that you just saw with the French kind of stripy shirt, I used to wear espadrilles. So I was kind of like post-60s, early 70s, trying to be a bit hippie-ish, little afro, and just developing a style, wearing jeans, much as I wear today, playing the guitar very badly, never kept it up.
So you don't do music? Music's one thing you don't do?
No, I don't, no.
Right. One thing she doesn't do. No. She does so many others. Right, let's go through it. What strikes me is the earrings.
Gypsy Rose Lee look, I think.
The earrings are amazing. I can't work out whether they're sort of birds of prey or birds of peace.
I made them, actually.
You made them, sorry.
They used to be a shop in Covent Garden that used to sell beads and all sorts of...
I remember it.
Do you remember
really,
it?
really well.
And I used to go there.
Many of you remember that incredible shop.
And they'd make everything that you needed to make your own jewellery.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, fancy that. I've forgotten about that shop.
Yeah.
Now, these are. This is you know what I've noticed through all the photos. Well, you project a very strong image in photographs. You're not a wallflower. You're not shy and retiring.
No, but I wasn't really extrovert, although you'd think so, looking at this picture.
Yeah.
So this was in the sixth form at school, and I was doing drama, and I was definitely fully into being an individual and making a statement through how I dressed. Mm-hmm. And I made those clothes. I didn't make the skirt, but I made I called it a Joseph coat, and it was made up of squares without a pattern, with lining. I don't know how I did it. And I made the jumper, and I made the scarf, and I absolutely loved wearing that outfit. I didn't keep it, unfortunately.
I wonder where it is.
Yeah. It's a very extrovert outfit, isn't it?
It is. Now I'm going to jump over a few, because I know this is one of my favourite ones. Talk about attitude. and hair. Let's talk about hair, because there are quite a few hair photographs.
Yes.
Now, here, no
Short.
hair. Very
Becoming
little
a feminist.
Hair. You're becoming a feminist.
In the 80s.
And for you, that meant cutting your hair?
It did then. Actually, today, you can be feminist and look anyway, but I think then there was definitely a uniform. And that was on Hampstead Heath, and it was taken by a boyfriend of mine. And I think it kind of symbolises what I thought of him at the time, because, oh my gosh, he's not here. He does stalk me sometimes, but turns up at events. But and I made that jumper.
Is he here? No, hopefully not. No old boyfriends here.
So anyway, it was the end of the relationship, and I think I'm saying something there in my eyes. And the jumper, I'm very proud of that jumper.
Did you make it?
I made it without a pattern. And I loved it, and the jeans, and you see the baseball boots again. So the theme carries throughout.
Yeah. Now, again, a bit of attitude there. And is this theatre days?
Sorry?
Is this theatre? Are you in the
drama school, fully fledged feminist, lesbian at that stage, and man's coats, second-hand clothes, well, we call it vintage now, but we never called it vintage then. It was second-hand clothes, and very kind of, developing a sense of the injustices in society in Britain, against myself as a black British woman, and feeling up against it, which is why I chose that image.
It's really good. Now that's a fashion statement, obviously. That's kind of
fully fledged lesbian.
I don't know how to read the signs, but
definitely.
Okay.
Kind of Radcliffe Hall inspired. Some of you might know who Radcliffe Hall was in the 1920s. And I was in Amsterdam, and I was going to a party, and I used to wear those jumpers. I love them, and used to smoke, as you can see from some of the pictures, and just playing around.
It looks like Bananarama, doesn't it? It looks like you're a member of a pop group. But we all did then. I mean, we all looked as though we were members of pop group, or wanted to be. Right. Oh yes. Yeah. How did you get your hair like that? That is.
So that's dreadlocks. Lot of twisting. It used to take a lot of twisting, and I sort of shaved it at the sides, and I had dreadlocks in different styles for a few years. That was when I was in the theatre company, and creating theatre about black British women from our perspective. Nobody had done that before. We were the first company to do that, and sort of enjoying my life, actually, although I'm always scowling in the pictures, but I do remember it as a time of adventure and finding my voice as a theatre maker and as a writer, being part of this wide community of black British women. Labaina Himid was part of that community, Jackie Kay was, Adjoa Ando, some of you might know these names, still around today, very active in the arts. And we were just creating the art that wasn't available for us. And we were definitely kind of alienated from the mainstream.
And this is theatre. This is one of you. This is a theatre shop.
That was a theatre production, Theatre Black Women, but we're wearing our own clothes there. So I'm wearing like this thick sort of check shirt and hat and spots on my face.
Always very recognisable.
This is interesting. This was in my 30s, and I kind of had a slightly corporate look. So I'd kind of gone straight by the end of my 20s, and seeing men.
Okay, wait a minute, hold on. So going straight and corporate.
Yes.
They go together, do they?
Well, I don't know.
It's an interesting
I think I was finding myself, and I was working as an arts manager for various arts organisations, and I was working in offices, not the office of the theatre company, but in other kinds of offices. And so I was smartening up. And I was wearing skirts, which I hadn't worn ever. Skirts and smart tops and jackets, kind of like tailored jackets and so on.
Did you ever spend much money on clothes, or did you?
No, never.
No.
Never. And my first book had just been published, I think. So I was, I think I was finding myself and somehow trying to fit into a kind of, an office world.
So do you not see that as being really you, or is that just another aspect of...
I think it's just a phase that I went through.
That's wonderful.
So that was about 2000, and I love that picture because I'd just come back from this train tour with 104 writers traveling across Europe by train over 6 weeks. And so I was full of life. And I actually chose that picture, A, because I really like it, but also I like the bright shirt, because this is me becoming very bright in the way that I dress. But I also like the khaki trousers. I had them for about 10 years. I wore them everywhere, inside the house and outside the house, until they literally started to disintegrate. And they had like this drawstring, and you could wash them. They were so thin, you could wash them and they'd dry in a few hours. So I am the kind of person who will keep clothes forever until they fall apart.
Now, this is just beautiful. It looks as though somebody made this skirt for you or designed it for you.
I think I got it in Topshop.
Really?
I did.
Because for somebody who didn't like skirts, I know you've worn a few.
That's true, I'm wearing a skirt there.
That is a great skirt.
I still wear that skirt.
You look like a model
there. It stretches a bit more now.
Does it? It's one of those... But you've always posed very well. I think that's probably the theatre, isn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. I just chose that picture because I think it's really flattering, and there isn't a great story behind it. It was at the South Bank. I was going to a concert.
I recognise the concrete.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. It could either be the Barbican or the South Bank.
And the other one is in Tunisia on holiday.
let's look at your family photo
Well,
album.
I think, no, actually, what it means is I was changing. I was becoming more, I don't like using this word, feminine.
Yeah.
In my 30s, I'd sort of stopped wearing clothes that were sort of gender neutral, although people would have called it boyish or manly then. And I was kind of claiming my so-called femininity.
Great in all. Now this is, let's talk a little bit more about hair, because it comes up in everything you write and every single book we ever read from, whether it's Chimamanda and it's hair. It's such a big deal. It's a big deal for all of us. We have a very complicated relationship with our hair. I do, I'm sure many of you do as well. We spend an awful long time looking after our hair, but for you it's even more.
Well, yeah,
loaded,
because for black women, hair is a political issue. And in this society, certainly talking about the sort of history of black hair in this country, it was only quite recently, in the last few years, that more black women started to wear their hair natural, because black women straightened their hair, or they wore wigs, or they wore weaves, because the sort of aesthetic standard of normalcy in this country was straight hair. And so black women it was not acceptable for us to wear our hair as it grows. And of course, this is something that's been topical recently in schools, where children have been told to plait their hair or tie it back. And these are children who are wearing their hair as naturally as white people wear their hair when they wear it down and straight, because that's how it grows. Our hair generally grows up and out. But when we do that, it's considered socially unacceptable in many spaces. So there's a book out at the moment called Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Dabiri, which is an amazing book. It's talking about the whole context of hair in a very deep and philosophical and political, cultural way, because it is so important to us in this society. Michelle Obama, who is the most amazing person, I have so much respect for her, her and her children, they wear their hair straightened. Because that is a way in which they become more acceptable to white society.
Do you know whether she made a definite decision about that early on? Or,
I don't know.
Did you ever straighten your hair?
No, never. But I used to loosen the curl. So my hair is completely natural now, and I fluff it up so that it becomes even more voluminous at times.
It's fantastic. It really is amazing. And that photograph
and that was a year
beautiful.
ago, I think. Yeah, it was just, it felt like...
Is that pre-Booker?
Yeah, this was pre-Booker.
Well, that's your life is now, what would it be? A,
Before
B,
and after.
A, B, and BB.
Yeah.
Post-Booker. So anyway, let's just move on to that one. And this probably is one of the most joyful photographs I've ever seen. The two of you arm in arm. Now, for many, many months, I assumed that was a red trouser suit. I was put very firmly, it's actually pink. It's fuchsia.
Does it not look pink?
It doesn't look pink.
Oh, it looks kind of red.
So
Yeah, no,
that's
it's
why,
a hot pink
That's
trouser
why
suit.
I've assumed always, she loves red too, I thought.
I do love red. I do love red. But the Booker Prize takes place in the Guildhall, the ceremony, and it's very grand, and it's a black tie event. I hate black tie events. I hate it when the dress code is cocktail dress, for example, because it is so gendered. So I thought, and I've been waiting to do this for a while, I thought, I'm going to wear a black tie. If you want a black tie, if you're going to call it a black tie event, I'm going to wear a black tie.
Wonderful.
So, and then I thought I'm going to wear really pink, which is traditionally a female colour, with it. So I then came up with the idea of the suit with the pink, and then I thought African headband to make a point about that. So that actually, I'm making various statements with that outfit. And I think in the future, whenever I'm invited to a black tie event, I'm going to do that. Maybe not the same suit, but I'm going to wear a black tie until they stop these dress codes.
Now this brings us wonderfully to the book, which won the Booker Prize. And we're going to talk a little bit about the book. We're also going to do it in a slightly different way as well, because we're going to introduce some of the characters to you through short readings. And we're going to focus particularly on what they look like, what these characters look like. Because this is, again, reading it for the third time, as I have now, and it gets more wonderful each time. And by the way, how many of you have already read it? Oh, that's great. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. So maybe you'll be able to see it also a little differently as well, the way we're going to look at it tonight, which is to look at the, more at the appearance, because this is such a big aspect of the book, isn't it? I mean, you can actually visualize all of the characters. And I wondered whether you saw them before you wrote them.
I think I'm a very visual writer. I like to create a visual image of my characters. But I don't know whether I must have conceived of them visually as soon as I think I conceived of them visually. And then kind of fleshed out the detail. I think that's how it works for me, yeah.
So, as you know, we don't need to tell you too much about the book as you've all read it, but I'm just going to give you a very, very quick synopsis and Bernie's going to read a few of the descriptions of some of the women. So this is it's about 12 primarily black British female characters and at various stages in their lives from 19 to 93. And these are interlinking stories, and they, all these women come from completely different backgrounds, but they are linked in some way, and many of them by this play that Amma, the first and the main character for me, Amma, who's this incredible, she's a theatre director, playwright, and her first play at the National Theatre is going to be performed, and that's how the book starts. So you've got many of the things, in fact, that Bernadine's been talking about over the last few minutes has been about this. It comes into this book. Now, it's not about her. I know you've said that very often. It's not an autobiographical story, but of course there are many, many aspects in there that she's been discussing. So we're going to look at Amma, first of all. And then we're going to show you through a few more photographs after that as well, about the backgrounds of these women and where they came from, and where their families came from. So let's start with Amma.
Okay, so this is Amma she's about my age, I guess.
Starts in the present.
In the present, yes. So she's walking to the National Theatre where the show's opening that evening. She wants people to bring their curiosity to her plays, doesn't give a damn what they wear, has her own sod you style anyway, which has evolved, it's true, away from the cliched denim dungarees, Che Guevara beret, PLO scarf, and ever-present badge of two interlocked female symbols. Talk about wearing your heart on your sleeve, girl. These days, she wears silver or gold trainers in winter, fail-safe Birkies in summer. Winter, it's black slacks, either baggy or tight, depending on whether she's a size 12 or 14 that week, a size smaller on top. Summer, it's patterned harem pants that end just below the knee. Winter, it's bright asymmetric shirts, jumpers, jackets, coats. Year-round, her peroxide dreadlocks are trained to stick up like candles on a birthday cake. Silver hoop earrings, chunky African bangles, and pink lipstick are her perennial signature style statement. Yaz, that's her daughter, recently described her style as a mad old woman look, mum. Pleads with her to shop in Marks and Spencer's like normal mothers. Refuses to be spotted alongside her when they're supposed to be walking down the street together.
Fantastic. Now, the fact about Amma, who is basically reappears throughout the novel and is linked with everybody, it starts in the present, but we go back in time, we go back to their parents, you look at all the different relationships of Amma and her friends and so on as well. How on earth did you bring all these different characters and all these different elements together? And I know it took you about 5 years, didn't it, to write this novel?
It was quite an organic process. I actually the book opens with Amma, but it really started with Carol, and then Carol led to Bumi, her mother, and then Carol also led to Letitia, who's her school friend. And as the book emerged, I knew I wanted to write lots of women's stories, and they kind of organically grew from each other in a sense. So all those three women had a section each, a chapter each. And then I had Shirley, who's Carol's school teacher, who then emerged as a character in her own right, and then Shirley's mother emerged, and then Shirley's colleague Penelope emerged. So, and then at some point I decided I needed to have characters in the north of England in a rural environment, because we're always urbanized as Black British people. So I then, had a whole group who are based in Northumberland and also in Yorkshire. And and then found ways to link them together. A lot of that happened naturally, and then some of it was imposed afterwards just to sort of increase the connectivity between the women.
But the idea was to, the idea behind all of this was to provide a picture of contemporary Britain and of these women. And in fact, I mean, it is a story about black women primarily, but I absolutely feel it's a book for me and all of us as well. It's a very, it's about today, it's about Britain today, it's about all of us today, it's about London, it's about theatre, it's about culture, it's about, the way we live today. You weren't just focusing on black women and wanting just black women to read it.
Not just black women to read it, because obviously when you write a novel, you want everybody to read it. But my focus was on their stories. But I think what happens is, you reach universal truths and experiences through the specifics of individual characters and their narratives. And one of the things I understand about this book is that people relate to it on lots of different levels. So I've had older men in their 80s, white men in their 80s, telling me they relate to some of the stories in the book. Some of the stories around class and struggle and leave, because the book is about class as much as anything. It's about gender, it's about sexuality, it's about, family, because there are 4 mother-daughter relationships. It's about people's dreams and, human psychology, how they get to where they end up in the novel. And I think because of that, people find different areas in the book that they can connect to. And I didn't expect that. I hoped that would happen, but I didn't expect it. And I think winning the Booker has dissolved the barrier towards people reading it. People are reading it, he wouldn't necessarily, I think, pick it up.
No, it's interesting because I went to another event, and this is a really a good thing to point out, actually, that Bernie's actually just written this wonderful short story for Vogue. Vogue UK, it's just out this month. It's an absolutely mad, brilliant, fashion-focused story. And I went to this event, and there was a woman afterwards saying, and she was black, and she said to me, she said, it's so fantastic, this book, it's my story. And I just said to her, it's my story too. And I didn't mean to be rude to her, but I actually felt, she can't just own this. This is all our stories.
Well, I like that, that's good. As I said, I think...
It's taking on a life of its own, this book,
It's definitely taken on a life of its own, And I know that black women say they feel seen by it, black British women. That's what I hear. It's like finally they feel seen. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they relate to any particular character. But because I'm writing from the perspective of, all the years that I've lived and all the experiences that I've had as a black British woman, being around a lot of black British people, especially black British women as close friends and so on, I am inside the culture. I'm writing from that perspective. And so there are lots of things that I write about that somebody who doesn't understand what it's like to be us wouldn't be able to write.
And you're writing about normal people. I mean, this is not about celebrity culture or whatever. These are just people people we all know.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's the plan. They are normal, even though some of them do achieve things that are perhaps beyond the ordinary. Yeah.
Let's have another character. Have you got Carol? Carol, as you said, was the first character you started with. And if you've read the book, you know why Carol is such an important character. Because she was, working class woman, Nigerian background, and she transforms herself. She goes to Oxford. She changes her life completely. She straightens her hair. Let's hear more.
So this is just a very brief quote where I introduce Carol through her visual description. Look, she's at Liverpool Street Station going to work. Look at her, in her perfectly tailored city clothes, the balletic slope of her shoulders, straightened hair scraped back into a Marshall top knot, eyebrows plucked with calligraphic flair, her discreet, no-nonsense jewelry of platinum and pearls. That's Carol. That's Carol succeeding in the corporate world, where she has to look perfect. She has to get rid of the kinks in her hair. So she scrapes it back so that you wouldn't even know it to be black hair and has it straightened. And everything about her visual appearance is so-called perfection, so that she blends in more, because for her, her career trajectory means that she does have to blend in order to succeed. She cannot be herself. And I think that's one of the issues, and perhaps that's one of the ways in which people might relate to this novel through Carol, for example. You know, what do you have to compromise or lose in order to succeed in your chosen sphere?
And it reminds me also of the photograph of you looking, you know, a little bit primmer as well, because, you know, you went through that kind of transformation in a way as well.
Yes, you know, and I sometimes have, you know, young black women saying to me at events that, you know, they relate to Carol because they feel they have to do this, but they don't want to do it, and they resist it, and they want to just be themselves. And I say to them, well, you have to play the game. You can't just be yourself in a corporate environment. In fact, the only people who can just be themselves are little babies, right? Until you reach a point where you realize life is about compromise. But if you are a person of color, or if you're working class and you speak a certain way, or you have a different sexuality, or, you know, there are many ways in which we are outsiders and different in certain environments. And certainly the corporate world we know to be a very male world. We know it to be a very white male world. So how do you succeed in that world when you're not automatically going to be accepted? You know, there are certain people in this society who are born into privilege and are born to lead. Our Prime Minister being a case in point. You know, before he was born, he was down for Eton, right? But most of us do not have that backstory, and certainly not if we're women. So there's always a level of compromise. And, you know, for me as a writer, one of the ways in which I can say things about the characters without spelling it out is through their visual description, what they wear, how they carry their bodies.
But yeah, you really, I mean, you're unusual in that you really do focus on that. It's absolutely fantastic. And I wonder whether you realise that, to what extent these were so visually, completely formed.
Yeah, I think for me, if I can't see the character, then they don't really, you know, they haven't really materialized for me. So I have to see a visual description of the character. And with each one in the book, they all dress differently, and I'm making, you know, kind of tacit statements and comments about them, about their culture, about their class, about their background, about their attitude, through their bodies, through how they carry themselves, through their hair, through their clothing.
Let's have one more snapshot, and this is, what about Morgan? Should we take Morgan, because that's actually really interesting as well.
I mean, Morgan is a character who begins as their life as Megan, and I'll just read the section when she's a child, because unfortunately this is something that what I'm describing here is still prevalent in our society today, and it's quite shocking, really. Her mother was unthinkingly repeating patterns of oppression based on gender. One example was that Megan preferred wearing trousers as a child, which she found more comfortable than dresses. She liked the look of them, liked having pockets to put her hands and other things into, liked looking like her brother Mark, who was 3 years older. Wearing trousers really shouldn't have been an issue for a girl born in her time, but her mother wanted her to look cuter than she already was, like the cutest of the cutest cutie pies. She was determined to dress Megan up for the approval of society at large, usually other females, who commented on her looks from as early as she can remember. It was the defining aspect of Megan's early childhood. She didn't actually have to do or say anything except be cute, an end in itself, which reflected well on Mum, who could bask in the glory of the compliments that poured forth as a validation of her love of an African man. Between them, they produced such an admired kid and made the world a better place.
And I mean, that's, again, is another dimension of this story. You're actually telling so many different people's lives and different genders as well. I mean, you're addressing every possible aspect of our society. And in fact, it wears so lightly. It's almost as though, you know, you're making a lot of political and social statements, but it reads so beautifully that you've got, you know, you don't notice the joins, if you know what I mean. But did you intend to be as political?
I mean, I'm a very political writer, actually. And, you know, the book has a lot of humour in it, and that's one of the ways in which you can get people to sort of accept some of the politics that's underpinning what the novel is about. And I'm not a didactic writer, and perhaps this bit that I just read is one of the most obviously political points that I'm making in the book, but most of the book is not like that. What you get is you just get a sense of people's lives, and you get a strong sense of their interiority, and hopefully you empathize with some of the characters, perhaps all of them, and then you see what it is that's making their lives difficult, the things they're celebrating, the journeys that they go on, and all those kind of things. That's what I'm thinking. But at the same time, I'm aware of gender issues. I'm aware of all kinds of levels of discrimination. I'm aware of colorism, which is, one of the things that runs throughout the book. It's not just about black women, black British women primarily. It's also about what shade they are, which is mentioned with some of the characters, and how they're treated relative to the level of darkness that they have. This is something that we don't talk about very much, but it's one of the most egregious things about racism. How you are treated as a black person, especially as a black woman, I would say, is dependent on, in some ways, the color of your skin. I'm lighter skinned because I'm mixed race. And I love what, talking about Vogue, Edward Enninful, the editor of Vogue of the last 2 years, has been leading the charge in having lots of really dark-skinned black women as models. And the other magazines are following, and the catwalks are following. But until recently, that wasn't the case. The gold standard of beauty was not blackness, and it was definitely not dark-skinned blackness.
I mean, Vogue is completely transformed now. If you pick up a Vogue today, it's a joy to read. Isn't it?
It is.
A joy to, I mean,
it's politicized,
and it is. But
Yeah.
he's been fantastic. He really has. Now we're going to take your 60 years, if you like, as a bit of a platform to look at a few other photographs, because these are really important to your history, to our history, and we want to take you back a little bit, because these are, if you like, where all the characters from the book came from, all of us. And this is life in Britain, and it started, part of it, or perhaps this book started in 1948. And this, as you know, is the Empire Windrush. It arrived at Tilbury Docks in Essex in 1948, and there were 492 black Jamaican passengers on this boat, and this was in response to a labour shortage in Britain after the war. So we wanted these people to come, wanted them to come. And as you know, the immigration to Britain went on for several decades after that, and it changed Britain positively forever. But there's been a long history, as you know, of a less positive reaction. Now, what we're going to try and do is, you haven't seen these either, but these are extraordinary images. And we're looking at them again from how people dressed, because it struck me, and it struck Hattie Bennett, who's a student from London College of Fashion, who's been working on this with me, how well dressed everybody was. So we're going to show you a few photographs. Now this, I'm just going to talk through them very quickly, because they're partly a surprise for Bernie as well. This is a musician called Mona Baptiste. She's 20 years old, it's her 20th birthday, and she's on the Windrush, and she's playing. And she went on to become really famous in Britain and Germany. And you'll be able to find some more, listen to these, go back and, familiarize yourself with these wonderful people. These are the servicemen, from Jamaica, arriving on the Windrush, dressed in their amazing uniforms. And there's Mona, looking very happy. And these, I love these two women. Hattie found this incredible photograph, because they were making a lot of straw and straw hats in Jamaica, and they brought their hats and their beautiful tailored suits and their straw bags as well. They brought them with them to Britain. So a lot of these clothes had been, they've been tailored, made in tailor shops in Jamaica, brought, but a lot of ready-mades as well. There are a lot of white shirts. Look at the dicky bow as well, the ties, the fedoras. This is incredible, isn't it? It's wonderful. And here, now this is, you'll see this photograph again later, but this photograph here on the right, on your left, is pretty typical in a way, and it has a particular story because these guys, they've got the tapered trousers, the structured shoulders, the two-tone shoes. They look dapper. They've got these ties, these slender ties that you like, and the white shirts, and they look as though they've just stepped out of a Hollywood film. So there we are. Look at that. And then this is also from 1948. It's this young, very young girl, and we don't know who she is, but she looks frightened, she looks expectant, she looks very, very young indeed. You can see all the suitcases piled up there as well. And we're going to move on to a few of these as sort of some of the identity cards that you had to have when you arrived and were collected again. Look at that tiny room. This is a very famous musician, okay? This is Keith. I can try and remember his name. All these names I've got to remember. But what was his name again? That's right. And that's right, Keith Edwards. And Queenie Markins. Just got to read the captions, really. It's like not rocket science, Rosie. So, and here he is rehearsing, 1954. So listen to their music again. Now, as Bernie's been saying, it was really tough as well. And this is this is just a snapshot of some of the worst images that we have found. And this you might have seen and read a book by David Olusoga, who's written this book called Black and British. He also did a television series quite recently. And it was the first ever series, wasn't it, on Black British culture. So there we are, that was in that book. And there's squalid, horrible conditions for families. I mean, it certainly wasn't everything everybody wanted. They came looking for prosperity, good jobs. And this is quite wonderful, I think. This is taken from the idea of the suitcases and putting your life in a suitcase. But it's from a museum exhibition. Then you've got the hair, and we're going to go on and talk about hair, and the amazing Afro comb as well. And this is. I want to ask you actually whether you have your own comb.
I've got it in my bag.
You've got it in your bag. You didn't bring it with you.
I've got it. I always have it.
Do you just have one?
No, I have several at home. Yeah.
So this is such a big. This is this great museum exhibit again. But look at that hair. Isn't that incredible? Buffon. Hair weaving. That's Peckham. And that beautiful comb there in a kind of coffin. It's called the ice pick. So, and then these are a series of photographs by, you probably recognize these photographs. Harry Jacobs was a very famous photographer, and his clients were mostly black, and they would come and have their photographs taken against these backdrops, which were fake Jamaica or fake Caribbean. And I think he got the wallpaper from some wallpaper shop and just wanted everybody to feel as though they were back home. And what had happened? These photographs, they'd have these photographs taken, and then they would send them home. Say, look, we've done okay, we've done fine. Look at us. Look, we're great. We're nurses. We're working in factories. It's wonderful. And that's just beautiful, sort of Nigerian dress, I think, there. And this is, again, I'll really whiz through these, but this is, again, it's from a book. Lorna Holder lived in Nottingham, and she came over in the end of the 1950s, because her mum was here, her parents were here. And she decided to look at her family and her family's history through clothes. And this is what she came up with. These are just a few of the images, but wonderful. And there's a dressmaker herself there, and lovely skirts, the pliqué skirts. And here we are, getting into the 1960s, getting close. And this is really to show you how black fashion has influenced all of us. It's there, it's central. Those shoes, she's in the middle of a road in Brixton. She's saying, this is all of us. This is, we're there, we're central, we're not in the background. And here we've got a little bit more of Janet Jackson, the big gold chains. This is our fashion. Everybody took it on after a while. And, of course, Grace Jones. And then, more and more black fashion designers as well coming up. And the final photograph, I think, this beautiful photograph. And this is from 2019. And it's the Met Ball, which I'm sure you've all heard of, which, of course, I'm sure you'll be invited to now. Now you've won the Booker Prize. I'm sure you will. But this photograph is Lupita Nyong'o, and you can see so many aspects of black life there in this one photograph. And the hair comb sticking in her kind of Marie Antoinette bouffant hair, and then all these other lovely things here. I think the theme of the show of 2019 was, I can't remember, what was it, Hattie? Can you remember? Pardon? Camp, there you are. Well, they're always camp at Met, so there we are. But thank you very much for getting all those photographs together. But you can see why we wanted to bring this in, because it all works, I think, so well in what you've been talking about. So before we've got a little nice surprise for you at the end. I hope you'll find it a nice surprise. But I want to ask you now whether you think winning the Booker and having achieved this platform, if you like, has changed because you are now, people listen to you even more. I know your students have to listen to you at the university, but people listen to you now. You've got a real voice, not just here amongst all the people who've loved your work for so many decades, but globally. Has it changed you? Are you seeing yourself differently? Do you see your role as differently? Or is this just a continuation of what you've always done?
It's a bit of both, really. I have to be careful what I say, for sure. Because there's a lot more attention on what I say, especially on social media. But I've been a literary activist for a very long time, and I've set up all kinds of arts inclusion projects. I've just released a list of 20 Black British women writers, which is part of the Bristol takeover that I'm taking part in tomorrow, and that suddenly is getting a lot of attention.
That list is online, by the way. It's so 20.
Words of Colour have curated
yeah.
it, and it's just 20 of the Black British women who have published in the last 2 years, because there are quite a few of us publishing at the moment, and that's getting press attention. So a lot of the things that I would have done in the past that would have gone under the radar are no longer going under the radar. And as an activist, that's what you want. You want to get attention, not just for your own work, obviously, but I want to get attention for all the other sort of community things that I do. Mm-hmm. So that's been a big change. Has it changed how I see myself? I'm constantly having to sort of recalibrate my thoughts about myself and my career, because I've spent so long not winning the Booker Prize, and everything literally changed overnight. Literally on the 14th of October, my career changed. And, suddenly within weeks, I had like 25 translation deals, whereas previous to that, I didn't have any for this book, and I'd only ever had 5 for all my other books. So, and I've been so busy that I haven't actually had a chance to sit down and process, I think, anything. But it's revolutionized my career, yeah, and I think it is changing how I feel about myself and my work, and that feeling of not getting enough attention and being marginalized. I cannot say that at this present time, because I'm absolutely in the center of things, which is, it's great.
Well, long may that continue. Anyway, thank you so much for the moment. We'll come back with a few, because we started a little bit late, so we'll be able to have some Q&As afterwards, a few. But we have got, if you'll allow us now, a little treat for you. Now, Bernadine Evaristo's novel has taken on a life of its own, as we've been discussing, and other people have been inspired to create their own artworks by reading this novel. Now, Hattie Bennett is a student at the London College of Fashion with a very strong interest in fashion, narrative, and feminism. Now, as part of her project for her finals in costume for performance, she's Red Girl, Woman, Other. And she's researched 6 decades of black life in fashion and in Britain, and since the arrival of the Empire Windrush, and she's gone on her own creative journey. So we'd like to thank Hattie very much for compiling the images running behind us tonight, and it's a special tribute to you, Bernie, and to your novel. For the final few minutes, Hattie is going to present you with her artistic interpretations of Girl, Woman, Other. Thank you.
That was so wonderful, thank you so much. I love the book, and I was greatly drawn to the dynamic Amma. She's a gay, black, single mother and a writer, and her mother's Scottish, her father's an immigrant socialist from Ghana. I was drawn to her sense of rebellion and activism and her longing for community and belonging, and that's why she created her own theatre, feminist theatre group. For the outcome, I wanted her to have an outfit that she could wear to the National Theatre on the debut of her performance. I wanted it to be a celebration of Black British identity and Amma's own achievement to reach this career pinnacle. I was greatly inspired by the zoot suits that were worn on SS Windrush. These men were so stylish, and they used fashion as a means of pride and functioned to rise the wearer above the stereotypes and alienation that they faced once they reached England. The fashion echoes a new hope for life in Britain. I was inspired greatly by the cinched-in waists, the huge lapels, and the great hats. For the prints, I wanted it to be colourful and proud. My main inspiration was the plaids from the linings inside of the suitcases, and Harry Jacobs' photography of the Caribbean communities in Brixton. So design-wise, I wanted Amma to wear her best clothes, as she mentioned people used to do at the National about 50 years ago. I wanted the design to match her eccentric dress sense and also have her sense of identity and colour and asymmetry that Bernadine describes in the book. So here are some more designs that I created with the print, and this led on to my final design for Amma. So this is the final design, and I hope that it represents a celebration of Black British identity and Amma's own personal accomplishments. So thank you.
We've got some time for some questions before you go and have your glass of wine and buy some more books. So if you'd like to ask a question, I'll scroll through a few photographs to whet your appetite.
Thank you both so much. This was fantastic. I just wanted to talk about fashion and design maybe a bit more expansively because I see these beautiful books on the table, and ask you about the cover design. And did you have a say in it? And what do you feel about the cover design?
I absolutely love both covers. So this is the hardback, and it was presented to me pretty much like this, but there was one of these images weren't quite right. So I then suggested they go and find something else, and they did, which was wonderful. And I had sent my publisher a photograph of myself to suggest that I wanted a character a bit like Amma or from Amma's generation. And they actually used this picture.
To hold the mic. I can hold the mic. There you are.
Okay, so they actually used this picture, which is of me, and they didn't tell me. So then when they sent me the book, once it had been printed, there was this picture of myself at the age of 21 or 22 in the book, which was just thrilling. So yeah, I totally love this. I felt it was a very artistic cover and striking, and interestingly enough, the three women on this picture, so those three young women, they are still alive and they live in Clapham, and they found out they were on the cover of this book. This book is, the photograph is lodged in, I think it might be lodged in Tate Modern or somewhere, an archive. And so the picture researcher found it. And so they then discovered they were here, they got in touch with my publisher, they came to my event at Brixton Library last year, and we took photographs of me with them. And they look, I mean, obviously they're a lot older. This was taken in, I think, in the 60s.
but they were just these powerful...
This is playing up a bit, so I'm not going to attempt to...
Sorry, they were these powerful, strong, dynamic black women of a certain age who had kind of been immortalized in this image when they were young, young girls. This is the paperback, which I also love. It's very different. And the reason they chose a different cover for the paperback, because they don't always, is because that original image was too subtle for the size of the paperback, which is smaller. And they commissioned the actual image from an artist called Karan Singh, I discovered later. And I looked at his work online, and I was just blown away. You would love it, Rosie, because his colors are just incredible. So he's this sort of graphic artist who uses the most incredible colors. And so that's where they got that from. And then the in-house designer did the rest. And it's textured, so it's kind of embossed, and it has inside flaps, which you don't usually get. So these are booker flaps, basically.
I think you're permitted to have them.
Yeah. So I absolutely love both covers, and I really do mean that. Yeah.
I want to thank you for tonight, and I want to thank you for writing the book. As a Black British Londoner, it is a book that incredibly moved me, and I felt very seen. And I suppose what I wanted to ask was around how easy it was to get the publishing deal, whether or not there was any pushback about the idea of this book being entirely about Black British women and the sort of different things, and whether, clearly it's won the prize, so it's now legitimised. But was that the case when you were writing it?
Okay, so the publisher is Hamish Hamilton. My editor is Simon Prosser, and Hamish Hamilton is part of Penguin Random House. I've actually been with them for 20 years. So, and they've published all my books, and all my work is kind of quite cutting edge and experimental, slightly radical in one way or another. So he accepted this book, so there's no guarantee that he would accept my work, but he always has done. So I've actually been in a safe house, a safe publishing house to get published. And in fact, I would say that having that as a writer has encouraged me to do my own thing. I have never had an experience with my publisher where he said to me, you've got to conform, you've got to be more traditional in how you structure your work, or any of those things. He actually relishes the fact that I do my own thing, and loved the fact that I'd written this novel about 12 Black British women. That said, I think, certainly 10 years ago, if this book had been sent to publishers, I'm sure, and especially because it's quite a few of the women on the queer spectrum and it's experimental in form, I would probably think that a lot of publishers wouldn't have thought it would be worth publishing. I don't know, but I would think so.
But he's a remarkable man.
He is, yes.
Simon Prosser. But this is this idea of also a publisher nurturing writers and letting you do different things, play around with form. And surely the novel itself has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years. I mean, it's much more all-encompassing. It can be experimental. That's changed.
Absolutely. So there is more experimental literature out there for sure. But you're right. So, the old school publishers would nurture writers over a lifetime. And what has happened, probably in the last 20, 30 years, is that if a writer doesn't break through and make the publisher lots of money, then often they're dropped. So people don't have these kind of long-term relationships with their publishers unless they become very successful at the start of their publishing career. Well, I'm very lucky in that I have had this long relationship with my publisher, and it has resulted in this, in a sense.
I had a thought when seeing the pictures of the people on the Windrush, that whilst they looked amazing in their suits, those suits are also quite fundamentally English, and whether there's something problematic in that was we can assume an outfit kind of forced upon them, and actually it's an example of lack of autonomy in fashion.
Well, you have to look at the history of colonialism and, the British Empire, which stretched over a quarter of the world, and in the Caribbean, and, they learned in it, they learned British history, and British culture was basically imported wholesale into the Caribbean. So it makes sense that they would then aspire to dress in British clothes, which they did in the Caribbean anyway, and also this was their way, I think, of trying to arrive and look respectable, so that they would be in their best clothes, probably their Sunday clothes. and so that they would be accepted by the host British society. We know that didn't happen. It didn't matter what they were wearing. But yeah, there's a long history of colonialism, and that it's a bit of a long conversation to have about that at the moment, yeah.
The question I had was, in the book, at the beginning of each chapter, you have the character's name. Above each of the names, there's a symbol above each of the names. I just wondered, we discussed it in our book group, we read Girl with Another, and none of us could get to the bottom of it. Are those symbols, are they some sort of like identity marker? Is there any significance for each of the characters?
So they're Ghanaian Adinkra symbols. I was looking for African symbols that would in some way represent the different characters. And so they are very old, traditional African symbols from Ghana. And each symbol I chose very carefully because each symbol represents a quality. It might be patience, it might be resilience, it might be love, it might be compassion. I chose the symbols so that they would represent some basic thing about the characters. So if you were to Google Adinkra symbols and go into images, you would see these symbols and the different meanings of them.
Before we finish, I do want to end on a really high note, a beautiful note, I think, because one of the wonderful things that Bernie's really brought through there is the beauty of all women. All these 12 women have different attitudes and issues and come from different, they have cellulite, they have stretch marks, they have all these kinds of things. And then Bernie wrote this wonderful quote, which I took out, which is, "We are all works of art. We're all life models. We have so much character and possibility in our physicality. We are alive." And that makes me feel so moved and so happy to have been able to interview you again. You're a wonderful writer, a wonderful person. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosie.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.